What's up, guys? The usual awkward start to stream, right? Because I don't do anything professional whatsoever. Like one of those screens as an intro to make sure that you have the YouTube timing down, all that nonsense. Oh man, let's see. What can we go over? Well, we let people get in here and all that kind of nonsense. Let's see. Uh, no. So we got Labor Day weekend coming up. I'm like about a month out from my presentation to the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. It's slightly more than that. I think it's 5 weeks, but yeah, I'll be debuting a talk there, which will then come out on this channel at some point. I have to hammer out a few details with a member of my club who does all the recording. I'm hoping that I can just like steal all of his raw footage and audio and not have to record my own. Because he has a really good setup for how we do our meetings and stuff. And I don't mind editing all that together. That's not that hard, but yeah, that'll be fun. So eventually look forward to that. Got some other stuff coming up. What we did last week, we did new emotes for those that might have missed last week. So there's a bunch of new emotes for members on the channel. You've got like Danger Noodle, Papa Limo, Bob the Sponge, What the Heck is Bentley's Hat, Shan Toto or Shanny. And then there's another version of Papa Limo with a rant for when I go on those long ranty diatribes about things. So, if you remember, you can use those. I put them all in chat. Let's see. I'm sure I should give a small update on the Master Aquatic Horticulture program. My developer is like in the process of moving, so we've kind of had a halt. She's actually got a job, if I recall correctly, out of state and is moving down to Oregon. So we kind of had a temporary delay on top of like a bunch of stuff just not doing what we wanted it to do. And us trying to fix why it was not doing what we wanted to do, even though it should. Let me get my phone out of my pocket there. And yeah, so we have a meeting scheduled later this week to do kind of a big catch up, and we should get back on track. And I hope we get that stuff done soon. Because yeah, I want the thing to function so I can give it to y'all. You know, working on it for a while, and I just want the thing to be done. Who'd thunk, right? Yeah. So with that being said, let's get into actual topic instead of me just buffering time for people to show up. Liquid carbon. I get a lot of questions about liquid carbon, liquid CO2. And there's a lot of good information out there. There's also a lot of misconceptions. And I think part of the big problem is because some companies call it liquid CO2, which is not true. So for actual carbon dioxide to become liquid, it cannot happen at the standard atmospheric pressure that we're in here on Earth, right? So if you were to see, I'll use my little sparkling water bottle, but if you were to see a bottle like this that said liquid CO2, it's not. Because the amount of pressure required to keep it in a bottle like this just can't happen. And more importantly, true liquid CO2 is very cold. Part of keeping it in liquid state usually requires cold. And most of the time when we do it via pressure. That's the easiest way to do so. So like when you have a pressurized tank of CO2, that's what you're doing, right? You're using pressure in order to contain that CO2 in a more portable state, such as liquid. So what the heck is liquid carbon? For the most part, not 100% exclusive. Some other organic compounds, you're going to see this very often, organic compounds are used, but typically it is a substance called glutaraldehyde. Now, glutaraldehyde normally is kept in a significantly higher concentration than is ever safe to use in your aquarium. So if you were to go out and buy from a chemical store a bottle of glutaraldehyde, you would have to do some very careful mixing because its concentration is significantly higher than like Flourish Excel or API CO2 booster. There's a great example of one of those things that is like, it deceptively names itself to kind of trick people. Easy Carbon, Aquarium Co-op's version, and there's like a million different liquid carbons, right? At least Flourish Excel and Easy Carbon and those don't try to deceive you by saying it is liquid CO2, right? I greatly appreciate that. So there's some great stuff out there, and maybe I'll have to do a video on this at some point, but there's a great video from Mike at AquaPros that compares using injected pressurized CO2, so a standard CO2 system, versus liquid carbon with basically the same size tank, same plants, all that kind of stuff. And you'll see a dramatic difference. So why is this different? If this is an organic source of carbon that plants can use, why is it so ineffectual? Why doesn't it just do what we want it to do, which is to be a source of carbon that you just get in a bottle, you don't have to buy an expensive CO2 system, and it just works? So the science behind this is really interesting. I have to dip away for a second. There's a comment from Stephen P., which I hope you're doing well. I know that Hurricane Ida has said hello to you. Which carbon is more flavorful, Excel or Easy Carbon? Neither. Do not drink freaking liquid carbon products. They are extremely poisonous to human beings. They will even hurt when you get them on your skin. They can burn. Don't drink your freaking liquid carbon. The flavor is death. They have giant warning labels on them, or at least they're supposed to, because you should be contacting poison control if you drink any of it, or you ingest it somehow. You're killing me, man. You're killing me. Anyway. God. So, plants normally want to be exposed to the atmosphere because atmospheric CO2 is at a very high level when compared to the amount of CO2 in the water. Okay? So, in our aquariums, if we just have natural like water churn at the top and stuff like that, we're typically going to see somewhere between 3 and 5 parts per million of CO2 present in our water system. That's basically just passive, natural CO2. Liquid carbon, the amount that's in there that can be actually utilized by plants is less than that 3 to 5 parts per million when dosed correctly. So most of our liquid carbon products, they're glutaraldehyde, but they're watered down. They're significantly brought down in concentration to make them aquarium safe. Because normal glutaraldehyde, how you would buy it at a chemical store or some kind of chemical supplier, is significantly higher in concentration. You don't want to use that. Unless you know exactly how to dose it, and it is complicated. Let me assure you. So, when we're trying to go with injected CO2, we're targeting somewhere between 10 and 30 parts per million, depending on how much gas we're trying to inject into our water system. So that's to tell you it's a significant increase, anywhere between 2 and 10 times, depending on how little CO2 you have naturally, more CO2 than is natural. And part of that is to add that additional CO2 makes it easier for the plants to acquire CO2, which gives them carbon. All they really care about is the carbon. They'll through the process of photosynthesis, expel the oxygen and keep the carbon in order to grow, right? Carbon's the building block of life, blah, blah, blah. This is like 6th grade science, right? Some simple chemistry kind of stuff. So why do they use glutaraldehyde? All right, we already know that, and there's some great studies. I would have to point you to the exact ones. I know I'm doing a lot of this off top of head, so somebody's going to probably call me out for not being scientific enough, and that's fine. But why then do we even use glutaraldehyde if it's nowhere near? And the big thing is glutaraldehyde is a phenomenal algaecide, which means that it's extremely good at killing algae when used correctly. Jimmy, 6th grade science. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Liquid carbon kills algae. Liquid carbon does not help plants grow. There you go, 5-year-old Jimmy. You're set, buddy. So, the reason why we use glutaraldehyde or liquid carbon products is basically as an algaecide. It is a supplement, whether we use injected CO2 or not, in order to help us deal with algae within our aquariums. So low light aquariums with liquid CO2 in small concentrations can be very effective at not having algae. However, there is the potential that by having that liquid carbon, or more importantly, your glutaraldehyde, within your aquarium can lead to other problems. There are several plants, especially plants in the Aponogeton family. So that's things like your Madagascar lace, and a lot of your bulb type plants. Also things like your Vallisneria species, and even some of your like dwarf Sagittaria type species, those big grassy looking plants. They tend to be extremely sensitive to glutaraldehyde and often will just melt completely away. I am not very proud to admit, but we'll say proud to admit, right? Because it's fun. That I have dosed liquid carbon in a tank where I had a really nice, healthy Madagascar lace, and in the process of about 2 days, I watched it melt. Like 6.5 months worth of growth disappeared in 3 days. Now it came back. But I learned the hard way, right? Because at first, before I did my own research, when I was first getting back into this hobby, I wanted in some smaller tanks to try liquid carbon, and I saw a lot of good results. It was like, oh yeah, it's helping deal with the algae, and my plants seemed to be doing okay. I had mostly easy plants. They were actually just doing fine. They didn't need the liquid carbon. So I was like, oh, I'll try it in my bigger tank where I've got some of my bigger plants. My swords didn't like it too much. Madagascar lace completely melted on me. And I was like, oh. Right? So I learned the hard way, and then very shortly thereafter, we had an auction at my local club, and our auctioneer at the time, a gentleman named Phil, we had a bottle of liquid carbon come up for sale, and he's like, "Don't use this if you have Madagascar lace." Ask me how I know, and I instantly knew that, like, oh, he'd done the same thing I just did like 2 weeks ago. I feel like a derp. So, a lot of people, and we're seeing even in chat, like Kelly Foreman, Stephen P., they no longer or are entirely liquid carbon. And so I will agree with what Kelly is saying in chat here. There are ways without liquid carbon to solve your algae problems in your tank. They usually require a lot of time and patience. However, some really, really difficult algae, let's say you have a really bad blackbeard algae breakout, careful spot treatment of liquid carbon is extremely effective at getting it under control so that your algae eating crew, if you have one, isn't overwhelmed and can then get everything under control and keep it under control for a long term. Lumpy Dog, I've got my first bottle of liquid carbon coming from Aquarium Co-op. Now you have to talk me off the ledge, please. Oh, man. So, liquid carbon can be really useful. I think it's important that we understand how to use it. It is not a replacement for CO2. If your goal is to get, like, you see all those beautiful aquascape tanks, they have lush growth, but you don't want to buy, like, an expensive CO2 rig and do all that stuff, liquid carbon's not going to solve it for you. Liquid carbon provides less CO2, less carbon to your plants than the natural atmospheric amount of CO2 that comes in from having your water churn at the surface. And that's only 3 to 5 parts per million, including what your fish are respirating out, right? Because they're exhaling that CO2 as well when they're breathing and putting all the water through their gills to pull oxygen out. So it's even less effective than the natural process in your tank. And even combined, you're still less than even the weakest running CO2 systems. So if your goal is to like get that super lush plant growth, you're not going to get that with liquid carbon. However, you could use liquid carbon to deal with really problematic algae. However, you could do the same thing with hydrogen peroxide, or be really aggressive in your plant trimming, which is something that Kelly Foreman just mentioned in chat. There's other ways to deal with algae that don't require liquid carbon. They take a little more patience and sometimes a little more aggressive measures, but can be done. It depends on which version you want to do. What's important to note is this. Liquid carbon is a small tool in your arsenal if you choose to use it. It should not be something you use every day. And the only case where I think continuous use of it is potentially appropriate is if you're at the highest of high echelons of crazy aquascape tanks, right? Where they use very small amounts to help bring things down, but they rely mostly on a very robust algae eating crew and injected pressurized CO2. They use very, very tiny amounts of liquid carbon. And that's only because it's a preventative maintenance tool. However, in a tank that isn't up to those levels, you really don't need the liquid carbon every day. My own personal liquid carbon experiments, I've seen more plants struggle when I regularly dose liquid carbon in a non-CO2 injected environment than I have seen them have significantly better growth. I'll see a little less algae, but I can do that same thing with a good crew of algae eaters, whether that's Siamese algae eaters and snails or shrimp or what have you, whatever you choose to make your mixture, depending on your tank, how you build your ecosystem, right? Than I've ever seen using a product in a bottle. One of the biggest, and I think this is a lot of consumer culture, one of the biggest problems that we often run into is especially when we're new aquarists, and I see this all the time. I had the same problem when I came back to the hobby, is you really want the answer to just come in some simple package. And the problem is no simple package provides the answer, because if it truly provided the answer, the one person that built that product would be like a billionaire, and it'd be the only thing you'd ever use, because everyone would use it. You wouldn't have your high-end aquascapes that are yep, you should always have CO2 because it's just so effective. And then you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you want this. You're just oh, just buy the bottle of this. It does everything for you. It's magic, right? There's no magic. Nature is magic. And if you can balance it right, then it happens. Then it's magic. But that balancing act takes a lot of work, a lot of patience, and just, honestly, learning from failure. I've had more success by screwing something up first than I've ever had by just buying a product. So, little food for thought on there. Little help. I hope that gives some clarity for folks that might have had those questions. Now we'll go into the normal. Oh, let me, for those asking, like, it depends on, when it comes to liquid carbon, it depends on which product you buy. Some of them recommend daily dosing. Some of them recommend weekly. I would just follow whatever instructions are on that particular product's bottle until you solve whatever problem you're working with. And then I would probably stop dosing it or wean off of it slowly. I don't feel like liquid carbon is something you want to use constantly. I feel like it's something you want to have on the side, because like, even I still have Excel downstairs in my fish room. And I use it only when I get some real problematic. So if I get like staghorn algae, I'll get a little bit of that in a pipette. Just boop, 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 boop. Kill it off. My algae crew will take care of it. But very rarely do I get staghorn algae anymore, because I've learned through experience and patience how to not have it happen anymore. But I first had to get staghorn algae and screw up to learn, oh, I did this and that caused this problem, right? It's just one of those things you learn through failure. All right, so go to questions again, like usual, guys, at Bentley Pasco. That's the easiest way to make sure that I see your question and can answer it if I miss it, because, you know, I do long-winded responses. It's okay to put it back up. Just don't spam it too hard, guys. And then if all else fails, my email is bentley.pasco@gmail.com. It's going to be in chat for those who are here live. Feel free to email me right now. I think I'm like 4 days behind on email. So just keep in mind, I'm not going to respond right away. But I do respond to every email I get. And if for some reason I miss it, don't be afraid to be like, oh, it's been a week. Ping, just making sure you saw this or didn't accidentally read it, and then like go think about it for a while and then got lost in the shuffle. Because that has happened a couple times, and then I've responded to those people and felt absolutely miserable about it. Oh, yeah. All right, so we'll grab some comments from chat real fast. We've had lots of people who both are love or hate liquid CO2 for different reasons. And then I wanted a couple of things here. So Paul Soltero mentioned that horned neorites and SAEs are his go-to. I don't blame you. It's been really hard to get horned neorites lately. I know that my buddy Jason at Redfish Bluefish has them, and I think last time I went to the co-op, I think they had some, but for brother-in-law James's tanks, he wanted the more cool pattern neorite snails, so we just got some of the normal neorites as opposed to horned neorites, and they've been doing some good work in his tank. Kelly Foreman is mentioning that it's glutaraldehyde's also an effective bactericide, aka they'll kill your bacteria, and you know that bacteria stuff is something you need for your filtration. Yes, it can be, which is partially why a lot of the liquid carbon products that are designed for aquariums are at the dosage they are, because they are less impactful to your bacteria at those dosages when they dilute them down. In the dosage that like glutaraldehyde comes in naturally, it just murders everything. So that's why you don't want to use like standard, I got it from a chemical store or a chemical supplier glutaraldehyde, because it's at such a high concentration in comparison that it will just destroy everything in its path. As far as what we would keep in an aquarium, it can be really destructive and very dangerous. Bob Purcell, is this the SAU you prefer? Silver flying fox? Well, every time they call it a flying fox, I get a little worried. But reticulated Siamese algae eater, the Crossohelius reticulatus. Yes, that's the scientific name, the reticulatus. So it should be, basically, it looks like a silverfish with a black diamond at the tail, and then has like, it almost looks like fishnet the way it's crosshatched. You just have this in the scales where you'll see like a black crosshatch. It's very, very faint, but that's the reticulated SAE. I love those things. And the reason why I like them so much is because even when they're adults, they always graze for algae. Unlike Normal Siamese algae eaters. I'm trying to look it up. I want to make sure, because the reticulatus is the... Yeah, that's correct. Crossachalius reticulatus. That's the correct scientific name. The normal Siamese algae eater, once they get to adult, they basically only search out protein because they're looking to get bulk up to spawn, and they'll really stop grazing on algae unless you give them nothing else to feed on. If you do give them nothing else, they'll feed on algae, but they will try their best to find protein. So I like the reticulateds. They constantly, even my big, fat, lazy adults, like the ones that are in here, they're constantly looking for algae on top of like when I feed regular food to the aquarium. So they're far more effective algae eaters. They also tend to be a little more aggressive about their algae eating early on, and slightly less aggressive than full-size Siamese algae eaters with other fish when they're adults. They still can get really rambunctious. So if you have groups of them, they're going to like kind of fight and spar or try some spawning behavior, and that can lead to some bullying of other fish. So just be prepared for that. Keep them in with fish that can handle that, or just so fast it doesn't matter. They'll just dodge and get out of the way. But yeah, I prefer those fish quite a lot. That's like basically the only SAE I buy anymore. I don't buy normal SAEs. And then also I do like Florida flagfish quite a bit. They're more seasonal out here. They only kind of come around a certain time of the year. And because they're like a pup fish, they can be a little more territorial when they're trying to set up to spawn. But yeah. Patricia Powers, my SAE will weigh 900 pounds when it's finished with my tank. An absolute Nathan hot dog type. I've got one that like just, it looks like a little silver whale, because it just kind of like, it flops on either the substrate or a leaf of some form in the tank. And it's obviously female because it's got a much bigger body. And it just sits there for a while, like being all slow and relaxed. And then it'll like bolt off somewhere and go fight with the other one that's in the tank. It's just like two broadside and battleships fighting each other. They're such butts. All right. Let's see here. Geek boy. Wait, screwing something up is considered success? I never knew how successful I've been all my life. Dude, I'm firmly of the camp that like we learn best from failure, and every time you fail, as long as you have the right mindset, you are going to be more successful in the long run, because you're learning things that will eventually lead you away from those failures and toward success. I've failed plenty of times at all sorts of stuff. We all do. Sean Lancaster. The story I hear about pressurized CO2 discovery is that Amano used carbonated sparkling water. Why don't we just use that? Is it just a myth? No. So it's not a myth. Most commonly, how people use carbonated or sparkling water is they will pour a bottle of it into a tank right after a water change or right before they're going to do photography, because then it makes all the plants look like they're pearling. The problem can be you only have so much in that little bottle for so long, whereas when we inject CO2 consistently over time, we'll get longer, healthier, more robust growth in a tank's lifetime, other than like, unless you want to put a bottle of carbonated water in every day. And sometimes you can't necessarily, you'd have to do a lot of work to understand the exact concentration of CO2 to make sure that you were getting the right amounts throughout the time of your day. But yeah, it all heralds back to Amano being basically the first person to actively use pressurized CO2 in tanks and realize the benefit. I'm not sure if that's the first person period, scientifically speaking, but he's the one that's most famous for doing it, and that's how like the nature aquascape style came about and proliferated the use of CO2 injection in the hobby. So there's a little bit of I haven't looked in depth into the history to find out, like, is he truly the first person ever to do this, or is it more just like he's the one that did it at a rate where everybody went, wow, what is he doing to get this much success? And then going, oh, well, this is one of the things I'm doing, going, maybe I should do that. you know, it's one of the things that he's most famous for. Yes, I don't know that he's truly the first, if that makes sense. You get lots of like, who was the first person ever to keep pet fish, and there's like an armada of different answers to that question. Joe Davis, is Ultralife blue-green slime remover similar to Easy Carbon, or are the active ingredients different? I have no clue. So, blue-green slime, or cyanobacteria, is a bacteria, and honestly, one of the easiest ways to kill it is erythromycin. Now, if you can't get erythromycin where you're at, because of how it's regulated in other countries, then there are other things that are good at dealing with it and killing off that bacteria. But erythromycin is probably like the fastest way to deal with it. The big thing is, blue-green algae typically occurs when we have too much light, or more importantly, a little too little oxygen in our water. Not necessarily not enough at all where the fish are having trouble. The fish can be doing okay, but heavily oxygenated water prevents cyanobacteria from forming. So very frequently, one of the natural cures that we can use to deal with cyanobacteria, and it doesn't immediately destroy a colony that's already in place, this is how you be a more preventative measure, is to increase the amount of oxygenation in our tank at all times. Don't turn your air off at night. Don't turn your air off during the day. Always have your air going. That having more air in the water is not a bad thing. The water will only absorb so much. That's part of why you'll see plants pearling, is the water is so saturated with oxygen, it really can't absorb anymore. And there's a few other details beyond that, but this is the short answer to it. And so that's why you'll see those little bubbles of air, because the water can't naturally absorb that extra oxygen, so it comes as a bubble, a lot like as it goes through our air stones and all that kind of stuff. And there's bubbles in the water. Some of it gets absorbed, not all of it, and the remainder goes all the way to the surface and escapes through gaseous exchange. That's like the easy science version. There's a way more detailed version that I'm totally not qualified to explain. That's left far better to proper scientists or biologists or chemists. Probably chemists, really. But you know, that's the easy peasy version of it for like dum-dums like me, so that we understand what the heck's going on. You know, while I know some science, I don't know that much. I was good in school, but I didn't like pursue it for a lifetime hobby, if that makes sense. Okay. Uh-oh. Stephen P. officially failed Pokestame on Hellfire tissue culture and just ordered pots of it from Dustin. So that plant, actually, like, one of the big things about that plant is it really loves iron. And it can be really finicky at first. Once it settles in, if you get through that initial phase, it is a very, very robust plant. But it can be tricky. That's for certain. R. Walker, thank you, Bentley. I'm new to your YouTube and have fallen in love with you. Your advice is priceless. It's not priceless. It's worth like 35 cents. Joking at YouTube's, for small channels. But no, thank you, man. I love helping people. It's like secretly like my psychotic enjoyment of most things is helping people out and using an inordinate amount of my time to do so. But that's because I get those nice warm fuzzy feelings when I do that, right? That's what makes me feel good. I love helping people whenever I can. I love spreading knowledge. It's good times for me. That's the way I'm wired. I'm wired real weird. That's probably why I end up in like roles where I lead teams, because then I'm basically constantly teaching those teams how to get better and better at things. And I love that work, and I tend to be really good at that work. K. Walker. Is aquarium carbon the same as wood carbon? I have burned a log. No, okay. So this is the difference between like liquid carbon and like activated carbon, right? So activated carbon versus liquid. Liquid carbon is glutaraldehyde, most typically. Activated carbon is actual carbon, but the thing is we use it as a filtration medium, because it's has extremely fine pores and is really good at sucking up a bunch of different chemicals. And chemicals is using a broad term, but think of like all the different things: ammonia, nitrite, some of the nutrients, all that kind of stuff. That's why we use things like activated carbon or what's the Seachem sells theirs as a specific name brand, but it's basically just carbon, right? And we use that as hyper fine water polishing because it's doing it at like a molecular level. It's very, very fine, very small. And once it's plugged up, you then remove it and put in a new carbon source. Glutaraldehyde, the liquid carbon we use in aquariums, does provide technically an organic carbon source, but it's used mostly as an algaecide. So it's a much different chemical. And again, we're going to use chemical here because although most places will call it organic compound, which it is an organic compound, we use chemical in the sense of one is chemical filtration. Your carbon, activated carbon, like your burned log and all that kind of stuff, right? The other is a chemical that is used as kind of a destructive measure in a sense. We advertise it as a promotion, but it's destroying algae because that's what it's really good at and can be at higher concentrations destructive to your bacteria cultures. So think of it more like how you would use hydrogen peroxide to oxidize something. You're using glutaraldehyde to kill it in a different fashion. And part of why your plants do really well on those pieces of wood is it's just when we burn off wood, especially, right? It breaks down some of the different compounds that are there and makes them more readily available because it's decomposed matter at that point, right? Wood in general can be really, really good, especially for our epiphyte plants, because they'll dig in, and as the wood slowly decomposes, which it's going to do in water, whether you've burned it or not, it very slowly will decompose. Some decompose faster than others because of the way they're structured. The roots that dig into all that wood can capitalize on those compounds and use them kind of like a natural root tab. Think of it like that. It allows them to access some of the decaying matter that's in the wood to further feed itself directly at its root system. And when we use, fire or burning of wood, it further breaks down that process and makes some of those things more readily available. And one of the best examples I can give you of this in nature is think of if you have a massive forest fire, go back the next year and look at all the low-lying plant growth, and it's all feeding off of all that burned and dead plant matter from the previous forest. It uses that basically as a natural compost and fertilizer to kickstart growth because it makes it more easily available. A little story time for that. So when I was a kid, I went to Yellowstone National Park, right? But we went the year after there was a massive fire. So we'd see all these burned out trees in some of the sections of Yellowstone, but then we'd see this extremely lush, low-lying growth, including new baby trees and all sorts of ferns and stuff. And the deer and things that lived there knew they were completely safe. They'd walk out completely in the open, not care. You've had tons of people there taking pictures and stuff, and they were just like, yeah, we know we're safe here. Look at all this new growth. There's all this food everywhere. It's okay. It is incredible. It's so burned into my memory because I remember we had planned it 2 years before. And then the next year, it was like, okay, we're doing all this stuff and we're going to road trip it out there and it's going to be fun. We're going to drive through parts of Montana. We're going to go see a couple of these caves that are out there. And then we'll go down to Yellowstone and we'll go see the forest and all the geysers and all this stuff. And then the fire happens and it's like, oh, it's all burned out. Well, we already planned it, so we're going to go. And I remember as a kid, it was like, well, there's been fire there. Why would we want to go? It's all just going to be burned and nasty looking. And then I was so shocked as a child. I think I was like 10, seeing how quickly everything had recovered and was coming back to life in the areas where the fire had been. It's one of those things where, like, I didn't understand it at the time. But when I started going through high school and high school science, I learned a lot about why that happened. And it's fascinating how incredible nature is at recovering from things that seem catastrophic. Now, granted, that doesn't mean you can just magically recuperate from like full out climate change, but from things like forest fires, the forest will come back. It'll come back with a vengeance. It'll just take time before the trees get back to the size they used to be. You know, things like that. All right. I know, long rant, right? Technoala, kanamycin working as well. So, I'm not sure if kanamycin will directly deal with, I mean, I imagine it should deal with blue-green algae, so cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is a gram-positive bacteria, where a majority of our like fish illnesses that are bacterial are gram-negative, which kanamycin and neomycin are really effective at dealing with. There's a lot of other ones that do too, but erythromycin actually like really doesn't do too much to gram-negative bacterias. There's a few that it will affect, but it's very slight compared to some of the other medications that are out there. And most of this information, by the way, this is research that I've basically wholesale stolen from Gary Lang. Because Gary is a chemical engineer for a living. It's like he's really well versed in what a lot of the medications do, and what works and what doesn't. It's very, very interesting to watch him very passionately be like, "Why are you using this? It doesn't do what you want it to do." And it's just like, it works on some stuff. Chill out, you know. But yeah, I think kanamycin should work on cyanobacteria. I don't know off the top of my head if it's like for certain. I just know like it's very easy for me to get a hold of erythromycin for an aquarium here, and erythromycin kills it every time. And erythromycin is relatively cheap. Whereas kanamycin is not sold in any reasonable size at an aquarium store. You have to buy those stupid little vials from Seachem that are way overpriced. But I imagine it should. I'm sure I could look it up, but look it up. Google will help you on that one. Trust me. Alley Cat, it's your superpower helping us. Well, thanks. I don't know if it's a superpower. It's just a normal power, but it makes me feel good. What do you do? Oh, you do. That's how I get my enjoyment out of the ability to babble at length about things. Paul Saltero, I've been keeping SAEs with discus for years with no issue. I tried Florida flags, but they don't do well in my tanks. I think the warmer high, oh yeah, they well, one, they're from Florida where the water is much more mineral rich, and yeah, it's more they like that kind of like mid 70s. They once you start getting over 80 degrees, especially, they're not a fan. They love that like 72 to 76 range. Where SAEs can handle a little bit more because where they're from naturally gets hotter, similar to the parts of the Amazon where some discus come from. Although a lot of discus, like in the wild, they're not actually as hot as we keep them in captivity. It's typically the bred strains that we've created that are so used to that higher heat, similar to like German blue rams, right? They really love that hot water, but the water isn't always that hot. And I'll be curious to see how much like temperature readings the aquarium co-op crew that just went down to the Amazon took. I'd be curious to know what the temperatures of the waters were for what they were finding. All right, Joe Davis. Joe, ready for a good one. Do you know of any livestock that could be affected by liquid carbon? Yes. So most commonly, the various livestock that can be affected, and it's not 100%, keep this in mind, but scaleless species of animals are more susceptible to those kind of things because they don't have the scales to protect them. And if I remember right, their slime coats aren't quite as robust as like our scaled fish. Doesn't mean that they all will, right? Doesn't mean that every scaleless fish is just going to like immediately die to liquid carbon. But the big thing is, if we dose too much liquid carbon is when it becomes risky. At the really heavily diluted levels, it's less of a problem. The big thing is that, like, as Alec the Nice is mentioning, glutaraldehyde is a type of oxidizer, and it is carcinogenic, so it can cause effectively cancer. Not as likely, but it's still technically a risk. Okay, there is a spam of Japanese text that I don't know. So, it's just gonna... Woo! I don't know what this says, but let's get rid of it, shall we? That's what I get when none of my my mods show up anymore. Give people mods and they run away. All right, DJ Mitchell, how do you save money buying aquarium plants? Just realized if I want to fill up my tank, it's going to be pretty expensive as far as I'm aware. So a lot of what I do is utilize local resources. So other local hobbyists who do stuff at like my local club auctions and stuff, that's a way. Now, if you don't have that, it's a little harder, right? You can, if you have the patience, just kind of farm your own plants over time. So you can start with less plants and, you know, not really push your light too hard and then propagate naturally over time. That's something I've done before, where like my first tank, I didn't buy a ton of each things. I bought like, I'll buy one pot of this and one pot of that and one pot of this. And, you know, it was like, I think it was when I was going to Aquarium Co-op back when Corey actually used to work in the store. That's how long ago it was. And that's actually like really the only way that I got to know Corey. And it was like, you buy 6 pots, you would get 1 for free at the time. So like, I would be like, oh, cool. I'll buy these 6 pots and I'll get 1 for free. And that was all I bought. And that's how I started the basic planting of my first aquarium. And that was on one of my big tanks. And you know, there's ways like you can look on places like Etsy or eBay. There are lots of people who will sell bundled plants that are farmed out of their tank, so they're already submerged growth that are a lot cheaper. You'll have to pay a little bit for shipping, and you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit, but a lot of times you can find plants cheaper than out of a store. The only difference is most stores will give you some level of guarantee, whereas a lot of times those sellers will not. So if stuff arrives dead, you're just kind of on the hook. Thankfully, anytime I've bought stuff online, I've had really good success because a lot of them tend to have some kind of storefront somewhere, and they just use every platform possible to get themselves going. So there's a couple ways to do that, but it's patience is your biggest thing. If you really want to have a very strong initial planting, it's going to cost you a little bit more money. You can typically find some sort of deal somewhere. There's lots of places that have all sorts of specials, or they have sales, stuff like that. Aquarium Co-op, for example, they're working on, if you're one of their members, you're going to get a 5% discount on anything you buy from them. And you know, they do sales every once in a while. They've changed a lot of their stuff, so they're just low prices all the time, I know, but you know, everybody has some kind of sale at some point. So sometimes it's just being a little patient and shopping and waiting until like the right sale comes along so that you can get more plants for the same amount of money. I think the biggest thing, honestly, in most aquariums, especially on a budget, is patience. Patience is your friend. If you really want to, if you need to do it on a budget, just be willing to grow those things out on your own and propagate on your own. That will help. If you can find other local aquarists who grow plants, like I've used OfferUp in the past to sell plants. So look at like things like OfferUp. Your local Craigslist, for example, is another great example. You'll find people that sell aquarium plants. And if you have any amount of reasonable population nearby that also keeps aquariums, and you can buy from them, you'll also find people that will ship stuff. And it's a great way to get usually really good deals on some stuff. You can get a lot more stuff for a lot less money. I used to walk people out. My goal used to be, when I was doing plants for profit, is I should be able to give them a good start for a standard 20-gallon aquarium for between $20 and $30. And by a good start, I mean like 50% of the tank was reasonably planted and ready for, after like 1 or 2 propagations, to be what we would call a densely planted tank. That was my goal. When you have one person like that, kind of everybody has to price similarly to compete against that person. And it's really common to just be like, I grow a lot of really easy plants. Please come take them on the cheap so that I get something for them. Otherwise, I'm just throwing them away. You'll find that all the time. Go with easy, fast-growing plants. You'll find them a lot cheaper. Like your water wisterias, your water sprites, Pokestable octopuses, stuff like that grow like really aggressively. You can find them very cheap. Von Lurker. That's such a great name, I'm sorry. Can I put Melanitania sahulensis, great fish, with Radinocentris at the same tank without them crossbreeding? The official answer is no. The technical answer is maybe. So sometimes your rainbows will be really good about not crossbreeding. The problem is if you're going to use a mop and two rainbows use the same mop, despite the fact that they're not crossbreeding, you could have one unfertilized egg in there that then gets fertilized by a different species of fish because their milk just hits the water in mass. So there is some risk. What I would do is, if you're going to keep them just to enjoy them, don't worry about them breeding, and then pull out your pairs into smaller tanks, breed them for like a week or two in a mop, and then move that parent out and let that tank be the same tank that's going to hold the parents and allow them to grow up inside that tank. Usually that works pretty well. So that would be my advice in that kind of situation. Cotton, Texas. What's up, Cotton? Will male praecox and female lacustris try to hybridize? They can. The female might not always accept that because she will be inevitably much bigger than that praecox. But they can try. They don't always do so, but they might. I've got male Gelatherina blaheri that try to breed all the time with female Melanitania frederici. So completely different genus. They're not even both Melanitanias, and they try to crossbreed all the time. Rainbows do what rainbows do in captivity. They just trying to show off for the ladies and make babies. Rainbows don't discriminate. Ken B, do you think erythromycin, or is that azithromycin? Azithromycin will get banned in the U.S. to prescription only. It's really hard to predict that. It basically comes down to like how much will someone somewhere lobby in favor or against it, and I can't predict that. That's impossible. It's really hard to get azithromycin in general. If you mean specifically azithromycin, which I'm pretty confident you do with your spelling there, versus like say erythromycin, which is more prevalent. Alley Cat with the hat emote. I will tell you, this is for the Lansing lug nuts. So Lansing, Michigan. And I kind of wish that the logo was a little larger than this. Actually, take it off and bring it up to the camera. Whoop-ah. There we go. But that is the Lansing lug nuts right there. I like this hat a lot because it's goofy. I love goofy hats. I can't help it. And minor league baseball has tons of them. Mr. What's in the Cooler? Can I up the dosage a bit of erythromycin for cyano? Or no. No. Keep it at the same one. With heat here right now, I keep treating it and it keeps coming. Yeah, so add extra oxygen to your tank. Like push more air into your tank. It will help prevent the cyanobacteria from coming back. Because as your water gets hotter, it holds a little less oxygen. It's a little easier for the cyanobacteria to become in the environment it likes and propagate itself. A little extra oxygen goes a long way, long term, to dealing with cyanobacteria. It's not the only answer, but it certainly helps. Uh-oh. Chad jumped a ton. That's how you know I'm behind. Billy gave his mods the Ninja Vanish mod. No, I haven't seen Mr. Singh or Candy Overhauls in a while. I know Candy's super busy with her actual job. Jeez. And I know something was going on with Mr. Singh, so I haven't seen him in a bit. But yeah, I probably have to promote someone like Rico Stan or something up to a mod. One of those people that's been around for a while that I know and trust, or at least I tell myself I trust them. Mr. What's in the Cooler? Oh, 2 in a row, you cheater. Will you happen to have more purple guppies, not purple, blue Hawaiian, I don't do purple, for redfish, bluefish in the near future? I'm actually trying to figure out a reasonable time. I might try to squeeze in a trip this upcoming Labor Day weekend because I do get an extra day off. But then again, at the same time, my lady's been like, I would greatly appreciate if we had some more time together. And it's like, oh yeah, right. I need to be a good significant other. But if I can, relatively soon. I'm hoping to do so before the weather starts getting too cold so that he still has time while the weather's right to make shipping easy. And he honestly kind of just sold out not terribly long ago. So it'll be another one where I'll bring him one more really big batch, probably for the rest of this year. And then we'll look until something like February or some such before I do the next one. But yeah, my goal is to go reasonably soon. And there'll be something on my community tab whenever I go. Because I always try to put information out to all the members and the community tab, all that kind of stuff. They're like, hey, if you're looking to get guppies, I'm taking a new batch out. And usually there's like some pictures or something silly on there too. Oh, Joe Davis, I just blew $60 on 1-2 grow cups for a 5-gallon. Still would last me longer than okay. Once you like kind of figure out tissue cultures for your water, then they become like insane deals because you just get so many plants for the amount of money. But it is, at first, it's really, really trouble because they can be so finicky. And I've had certain ones that just like are like, I have no problems, and others are like, nope, we ain't doing nothing. Nope. It's like, oh, come on, man, just grow. I want plants. Dr. Black's in the house, so he'll have his stream in like 15-ish minutes. Have a beverage with my good friend Down Under. He's a good dude. Plus, he's fun to listen to. Kelly Foreman, hey, Bentley Pasco, what's your hat size? So for a fitted hat, I'm an 8. Yes, I have a massive freaking skull. That's the largest size they make available. For the stretch fits, which are what I love the most, like this hat here, it's the large, extra large in New Era hats. They have a bunch of weird sizes for like the 47 brand hats, and I've never figured out what my size is there. I just avoid their hats at all costs. And then, of course, there's always, like, your snapback hats that have a little bit more range to them. I tend to prefer fitted just because, like, I played a lot of baseball, and you get, like, this weird, like, snooty thing, like, I love the fitted hat feel versus, like, your trucker-style hats. But, you know, my granddad was a trucker, so I still like a proper snapback trucker hat every once in a while. Aw, oh, God. So 2 comments got me laughing. So first was Paul Sotero, trust Rico at your own peril, just saying. And then Rico, man, have I got him fooled. And right after that, Mr. What's in the Cooler, that pause every time Billy Pasco reads my name, lol. Thanks for the reliable feedback. Every time I read your name, I get a little chuckle. And deep down, I'm like, what is in the cooler? What are we talking here? You like going like true popper, like country music style? You got some silver bullets in the cooler? What are we talking about here? I actually had a chat with my boss. This is a side story. You're going to get it. You guys should be used to this by now. You're like the faithful that are here this late into the stream. That chat with my boss 2 days ago? Yesterday? Yesterday. Right, because it's Tuesday. Wow, my brain. So we were having lunch together, and he'd just got back from vacation not long ago. And he was talking about how he was out fishing with his son. And he's like, yeah, man, I took a tiny cooler. I just anchored it into the water because the water was nice and cold. It kept everything cool. It's like, and I was like, all right, I've got to ask you. You know, we're in the Northwest. There's a ton of like good beer out here if you're a beer fan. What do you usually take with you? And he's like, oh, dude, I'm cheap. I just go Coors Light. It's like, oh, all right. not trying to go fancy or be snobby about it. Just nice and easy, right? uh, little things like that, I always wonder. WAF, I'm here this late in the stream. What's up, man? Good to see you. Oh, Lord. Bravehearts 1986. Took time from my vacation to tune into your live channel. Worth it. Dude, thank you. Don't enjoy your vacation. This is always going to be here. You can watch the replay. Enjoy vacation. Although, I guess some would argue fish is like a vacation. Honestly, like my ideal vacation, we'll go off because I don't have a normal question on there. I've got now Fishy Mailman just put one in there. But my ideal vacation is a staycation. I am so happy just taking a week off and doing nothing. And by nothing, I mostly mean catching up on all my housework, but more just spending time at home, relaxing and enjoying my fish. Dude, that's the best vacation for me. And I've done all sorts of stuff. Like I've done tons of stuff when I was a kid, and you know, as an adult, I've gone to like Las Vegas several times for conventions and some stuff like that, or like gone to Florida, which whew, I know for some of you Floridians you're very proud, but man, summer Florida weather is the absolute devil for me. But yeah, mostly because like I can't do ultra humid weather, and it's, you know, it's 9 a.m. It's 98 degrees and 100% humidity out there, and it's just like bleh. It's so terrible for me. But yeah, dude, thank you for tuning in on vacation. All right, Fishy Mailman, my good buddy here. When human malware is over, what's the show you are going to? Oh sir, I've even got a link. One moment. Let's go hunt this down. It's sad that the most reliable way for me to do this, and I really hope that the Rainbowfish side of this gets their freaking link on time. Actually, I'll go the YouTube video because that's more fun. Although it's going to try to embed it, probably. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. Bonk. YouTube will fix it naturally. They're really good at that. So that is the American Cichlid Association, American Lion Bears Association, American Killifish Association, and the ANGFA North America Combined Convention next year in Louisville. I'll try to do it right. I know. I'm a Louisville person because I had an uncle named Louis. Louisville, Kentucky. I'm going to go see a buddy who lives out there who's been like begging me to come out to his place. He lives like 20 minutes outside Louisville. I'm going to go hang out with a bunch of fish nerds. I'm probably going to hit the bourbon trail with my friend because I occasionally like a little bit of bourbon, although I'm not a big drinker. I have it a little bit. So I'll go do that because it's a fun touristy thing to do with my buddy. We'll just get a nice Louisville. Yeah, I know. See, the thing is, I have an uncle. Well, he's passed now, but had an uncle, great uncle, technically, that was in the French Legion from France. My Uncle Louis, and anytime I see it because it's spelled that same way, I pronounce it Louis because it's so ingrained in my head from when I was a kid with Uncle Louis. Paul Sotero, I'm really looking forward to Louisville shows, and while I'm there, some bourbon. Yeah, dude, there's a ton of great bourbon there. I mean, obviously, it's like the bourbon capital. You know, that's bourbon's in Kentucky, whiskey's in Tennessee, blah, 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 blah. So other than that, man, I get that from my granddad on my dad's side. He was a big Scotch and whiskey drinker, so naturally, like, that just passed down in the genes. It skipped a generation with my father, and was just like, oh, yeah, you're the one who's going to like these things. Yeah, it's going to be the last weekend of July. So it's July, I think, technically it spans like a whole week. It's like the 27th through the 31st. But yeah. Dr. Black has perked up at the word bourbon. Yes, sir, I said bourbon. But, you know, it's more like I'll get to see a buddy who lives out there. There's a lot of, like, cool stuff in Louisville, naturally, just because it's a big shipping hub. So there's tons of business. There's lots of people. Kentucky, in that area especially, is very pretty. Yeah, man, it's gonna be great. I'm just gonna like chill. I'm gonna have some fun. And Cancer Train, to answer you, is my friend in Lagrange. I actually think that is where he lives. I can't remember off the top of my head. He has a farm, like technically. His is he has like 10, it's like 10 and a half or 10.7 or something like that acres of land. So he has a small farm and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, he's just outside Louisville. He's like 20 minutes away, basically. It's a short drive. And he was like, dude, when you come out here, I've got a car you can borrow, a room you can sleep in, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I might just stay at a hotel because I'm lazy. But then again, it's hard to say no to that. Like, I've got all these things you can just use. But yeah, that's what I'll be doing. That's the convention I'm going to. I wanted to originally go to the October version of Aquashella in Dallas, but it's just not worth the risk. I know a ton of people have been enjoying Aquashella, but you know, I have enough people who have weakened immune systems in my family or that I work with. So even though like I'm fully vaccinated for the cough, I don't want to risk getting human malware and giving it to someone else. Even though basically everyone I work with is vaccinated, all my family is vaccinated, I don't want to risk it. It's just not worth risking it at all because I don't want someone to get sick, have to miss work, anything like that. And it's just a matter of like certain places. It's just plain ultra paranoid, you know. I just want to stay safe. It's the biggest thing. It's just the biggest thing. And really, I really, really want to go to the Rainbowfish convention if I'm going to do anything. And I've basically been strong-armed by Gary. If I don't go, he'll be very mad at me, which means he won't sell me rainbows anymore. So I'm pretty sure I have to go. But also, it's a great excuse to go see a friend and stuff. So, you know, I'll feign like I have to go. I want to go. Let's be honest here. I want to go talk with a bunch of fish nerds, especially because it's the first North American, or it's the first United States convention for ANGFA North America in 20 years. Yeah. Big hooky. Any update on the Aqua Sky settings video? Coming very, very soon. I'll have my like full updated ultimate guide coming relatively soon. I'm working on doing some of the initial filming this weekend, basically. So I have a different video coming. I wanted to start it. I was hoping to get the first one out this weekend, but just timing around my house didn't allow that because I need to do a little bit more work on those particular videos. So that will start its filming this weekend and debut the weekend after. Because that's about what my current rate is right now. I wanted to have a drink and chat with Bentley, but he grabbed a bottle of wild turkey and took off. I guess my plan had gone awry. It's funny because my buddy recently sent me a picture from the little cafe that is a part of the Wild Turkey Distillery, and it has this just beautiful view. He sent me this picture. He's like, yeah, I'm having lunch here right now. See you next year, buddy. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Xanadu, I kind of laugh at your name every time, too. And I try not to do it out loud, but I have a trio of Cyanobacteria furcatas in a heavily planted 40 breeder. Last water change, I sucked up one little fry. How many more might be hiding in there? So, the Cyanobacteria have a lot less eggs, but they will spawn daily. So, hopefully, you'll slowly get fry that survive, and it'll be kind of like... one of the best Kurai tetras are one of the best examples that do this pretty naturally, where you'll just slowly get fry and you'll slowly build up a colony. It's awesome when you do. The good thing about furcata, especially, is they can eat baby brine shrimp as soon as they hatch. So if you start feeding live baby brine in small amounts, it will kind of further the desire of the adults to reliably spawn because they know that there's plenty of food available for the babies. It triggers something naturally in them. Just a heads up. All right, we're getting close. Dr. Box coming up soon. Let me give you a link for that one. Then we'll answer a few more things in chat. We're just kind of chatting, having fun. What is this crazy nonsense? Fun? Are we allowed to have that anymore? There it is. There's that man's face. All right. There's a link to Dr. Blackstream if you want to keep the streaming going after I'm done babbling here. But yeah. Kelly Foreman, I'm not usually into conventions and such. This is my only exception. I love conventions because I'm a super extroverted person. I love just babbling, as should be obvious by the fact that I babble for an hour plus every week about fish. I love just talking fish with people. I don't go to conventions because I'm like looking to buy something or I'm there for the talks. Like when I was at AGA, I didn't go to any of the talks at all. I sat and I just talked with people. So people that had come up, some of the other YouTubers that were there, I just sat and enjoyed conversations with people. I got an opportunity to meet both Danny and Kenny from Danikin Aquatics. I got to meet Ginger Graves. I got to meet a ton of people who aren't necessarily on YouTube as far as like active channels, but are like people that just watch either my channel or other channels and have heard of me. It was a ton of fun. Ton of fun. That was the best part for me. Just babbling with people. Susan, good night. It's good to see you as always. Take care. Hope you're doing okay. You had a video that was up for a little bit. I was a little worried, but hope you're all right. If somebody's bullying you, you let me know. I'll go yell at him. Don't nobody pick on Susan. That ain't right. Oh, geez. There's like all sorts of advice about places to go and when I make my grand trip. Alley Cat. Oh, you didn't like my Tidal 35? I upgraded to a 207 canister. The Tidal 35 is designed differently than the rest of the Tidal filters, and the way that like the 55 and higher Tidals are designed is really nice, and the 35s are completely different. And I really don't understand why it's so different, other than I guess the size and trying to fit their pump housing correctly. But it's one of those things where it's like, you have this really great design filter. Why is the smallest size changed in design so that it's not as great? I don't get it. I don't get it. Stephen B., I'm going to Dallas all alone. So it's not about, me going to Dallas isn't about, like, having friends to be there. It's more like, how to put this? Given the environment of things going on right now, and I'm not one of those, like, you must have a vaccine people. I think it's just smart if you want to just not die from this stupid human malware, but, you know, people have their rights not to want something in their body. I get that. I get it. I don't necessarily take that with myself. I would much rather just not risk dying, but hey, you do you, right? Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody has a belief. Technically, we're supposed to have those in this country. But Texas, especially the Dallas area, has kind of a low vaccination rate right now, and with Delta variant going around, I just don't want to risk bringing anything home. I don't want to risk, like, not feeling symptoms going into work, because, like, one of the things that I learned this from my mom. My mom's works in the medical profession. A lot of the virus that sits up here in your nasal passages and in all your mucus up there, right? There's not enough blood flow in that area to get the antibodies there, even if you're vaccinated, to kill it all off. So it can sit and just chill there. And then if you sneeze, it can get airborne, even if you cover. Hopefully you cover or are wearing a mask or whatever the heck you're doing, right? I always try to, at a bare minimum, have a Kleenex. I keep Kleenex at my desk all the time, or, use the inside of a shirt, whatever it may be. Try not to sneeze openly on people. That's not nice. But it can harbor in there even if you're vaccinated, and you can get other people sick. And the problem is I work with a lot of people who have are immunocompromised in some way, shape, or form, or members of my family who are in that case, and I just can't risk getting other people sick. That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to risk, for my personal fun, to potentially bring something back and get other people sick. I don't want to make anybody lose time at work, involuntarily, or deal with any of the things that could come with it. It's just not worth the risk to me. Hopefully, human malware is under enough of a control by the time July of next year comes around that I can go and, like, feel nice and responsible by having fun in Kentucky, babbling with fish nerds, doing some Rainbowfish stuff, having a few beverages. I know. Try not to be, like, political about it, but it's more just like, I just don't want to risk anything. That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to risk my friends, all that stuff. Oh, yes. I have to get this all the time. So Fishy Mailman, try Orphan Barrel if you get a chance. All right, good to know. I'll ask my buddy about it because I'm sure he knows. Yeah, Xanadu, totally. Baby brine shrimp is your best friend. I have the question I get all the time. Alleycat, what do you think about Biohome Ultimate Filter Media? Boy, I swear I'm going to do it. So I have not personally used it yet. I want to eventually test it and compare it to other medias to see if any of its claims even hold up. However, in general, when the person selling something claims that it is the bestest, greatest thing since sliced bread, I don't believe them. Ever. Because I've never seen any data or any form of testing that can prove Biohome Ultimate is any better than any other ceramic media out there. To me, it seems like it is drastically overpriced for what it is. And a lot of that is marketing. Now, this is no slam to people like Pond Guru. I want to be very clear about that. I love his channel. I watch him regularly. However, in any time in which someone sells a product and they have a major stake in its direct profit, other than like I happen to care, I'm a generic fish store that has a YouTube channel and carries Brightwell products. Of course, I'm going to talk positively about Brightwell. But if I am a part of the development cycle of a product, I stand to gain significantly more by promoting that product than if I just carry a product someone else makes, right? I'm inherently skeptical about those things. So I want to test it before I'll ever say anything about it beyond I'm naturally skeptical, but I have not tested it yet. So I would like to test it before I have any definitive answer. Sure, and I'm sure there's ways to get it cheaper. It's just everywhere I have seen it, it's way overpriced compared to other things I can get. Even stuff that I know is very good. Paul Sotera, I'm going to find Angel's Envy. Angel's Envy is pretty good stuff, but it's actually not the. I would argue it's not the best stuff that's there in Louisville. Also, just a hint for those who happen to go there: do not buy any of your stuff at the distillery itself because they drastically increase the price for tourists. Go to a lot of the local retailers that will carry all the same stuff, and it's dirt cheap. Especially if you have a way to get into a Costco. Because at Costco, it's incredibly cheap, and they carry all the same stuff. Just a heads up. Just a heads up. All right, so one last question I'll get to. Or I guess technically more of a comment. Zen Ginger. I'm a little concerned living in Houston that Dallas is going to get shut down again. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? People have had tickets to go to this stuff. You certainly don't want to have the event get shut down, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just for me, I would rather save my money now and make sure that I have a ton of fun out at the Louisville convention and maybe try to hit Aquashella next year than have the potential risk. Because, like my members of my house, I don't want to risk getting them and have any issues with them. My coworkers, especially, because one of the people who works on my team is immunocompromised. Another person who's on my team is over 50. So, they're by nature, they're in one of the higher risk categories. I just don't want to risk that for their health more so than even my own. And yes, as an overweight human being, I'm in a higher risk category. But in theory, the math behind being vaccinated says I'll just feel like crud for a week or two. It's one of those things, right? It's one of those things. Xanadu, welcome to Auto Singles. Now you have emotes. It's going to be great. So yeah, I'll let you know, guys. We're going to get going so that Dr. Black can get rolling. Thank you so much for everybody's here. We'll talk a little more about some upcoming stuff here, probably next stream. Hopefully, I get a really huge update on the Master Aquatic Horticulturist program and can give you guys a big update there. I'm really, really trying to get this stuff taken care of. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. So much for watching. It's always a blast having you folks in chat, especially you folks that stay the whole time or stay for the long haul. Maybe you come in a little late, but you stay long term. You're always the best. And the end of the stream is always the most fun for me because it's kind of a little wild and loose. Thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.